like to welcome our first guest, Senator Amy Klobuchar. Senator Klobuchar has been a United States Senator representing Minnesota since 2007, and she was a candidate for the Democratic nomination for president in 2020. Advocating for women was what brought her into politics in the first place. Very soon after giving birth to her daughter, she appeared before the Minnesota legislature to testify on why all women should be allowed to stay in the hospital for more than 24 hours after giving birth. And now she's working very hard on a huge issue for women. There are 9.5 million fewer jobs in the US than there were last February before COVID hit. This is a lot of lost jobs, more than the height of the Great Recession, and the losses have disproportionately affected women, and especially Black and Latino women. So, Senator Klobuchar, thank you so much for being here. And I'd love to start by just hearing from you what our first priorities should be policy-wise to support women returning to the workforce.
Well, thanks so much, Catherine, and it's great to be on this Quartz interview and with everyone. And it's a beautiful day here in Washington, I have to say. It's like 70 degrees, the sun is out, and I'd say the first thing to get us through this is to not give up hope, to look at that blue sky and to remember that we have seen an enormous change in the number of vaccines available and the distribution of those vaccines, and the president is going to be signing into law, I hope this evening, one of the biggest things we could do for the American people, and that is help with the vaccine distribution, but also with child poverty, with work that needs to be done for families. And, you know, I'll start with that. It's been moms and dads that have been bouncing their toddlers on their knees, and they're balancing their laptops on their desk, teaching their first graders how to use the mute button just to learn to read, trying to figure out what to do with a bunch of middle school students that are at home. And then, of course, your point, the job loss, some of which has been precipitated by needing to stay home with kids that couldn't be in school, but some of it simply their jobs went away. While job totals are down across the board since the pandemic began in early 2020, women, as you have just pointed out, have lost nearly 1 million more jobs than men, with jobs, as you mentioned, disproportionately impacting Black and women and Latinas. And over the past year, 2.3 million women left the workforce, including 275,000 who exited just last month. So if you think, oh, it's getting better right now, that's just last month's figures. And women's participation in the workforce is the lowest it's been, this is a sad fact, in 33 years. And I went through some of this. Some of it is the industries that they work in where they've been hard hurt. Service, right? Tourism. Women also make up a higher share of state and local governments that have been affected. Many working moms, as I mentioned, affected. And it's interesting because the last major downturn, and of course this is in addition to that, a public health crisis, but the last major downturn in like 08, 09, men's jobs, construction jobs and the like were more affected. But this time it's women's. And that's why I announced a Marshall Plan for Moms. The name comes from bold, world-changing past investments that America undertook in 1948. The Marshall Plan revitalized post-war economies of Western Europe and prevented countries from falling into economic uncertainty that would make our democracy vulnerable. By funding a Marshall Plan for Moms, we recognize that recovering from this economic crisis means investing in the prosperity of our families. And it involves, of course, comprehensive paid leave, funding to rebuild and stabilize the child care industry, so much of a problem, major investments in education, expanded child benefits, extended unemployment, and access to mental health support for moms. Tim Kaine and I just put out a bill this week about mental health for everyone, which is, of course, one of the major fallouts from this pandemic. So what we just did some great things to help safely reopen our schools, supporting childcare, extending tax credits for paid sick leave and family leave, and it makes it much easier. But there is so much more that we need to do. So I'm very excited about helping to organize this effort and work with such leaders like my good friend, the Vice President, Kamala Harris, as well as so many of the other women in the Senate. Catherine, did you have a second question? I didn't want to filibuster, move on, not take up too much time to allow for some other questions. So,
Not at all. So you pointed out that a lot of these are pre-existing conditions, right? The situation for working women was very difficult and in some cases impossible even before the pandemic hit. And one of the biggest issues, of course, is childcare, and which was a massive crisis already. And in 23 states, childcare is more expensive than college, which is crazy. So what needs to happen logistically and investment-wise to ensure that all families and everywhere have access to high quality and affordable childcare?
well, we know that this shortage of quality, affordable care has become a crisis in America. And I think that one of the things people don't always realize, because they know about their own stories from their own neighborhoods, their own friends, it's really everywhere. There's all these rural childcare deserts in my state. I happen to spend a lot of time in Iowa. I don't know why in the last few years, but there it was very extreme, where there are actually jobs that people want to go to, but there's no childcare. And I've been surprised with people like in Marshall, Minnesota, where their chamber and some of their leading businessmen and women, their number one ask of me during a meeting was to help them with childcare and to figure out how the state can help, how the feds can help to make it better, because it was making it hard for them to have workers. We all know why. Sometimes people have weird hours. They're working at nights a lot, and they need childcare at different times. Sometimes they can't afford it. Sometimes the situation doesn't work for them, or but everyone's heard about this, there's not enough slots. Sometimes you have, in my own case, I had a big plan when our daughter was going to be born, to share childcare with 3 other families in one of the people's homes. And then my daughter was born, and she was so sick she couldn't swallow. She was on a stomach tube, and we couldn't use that kind of childcare. And we had to have someone come in during the day for the first few years, and then I ended up putting her in a preschool when she got better. But people have all kinds of things that happen like that. And the pandemic has only made the problem worse. Child care providers were among the first to feel its effects. First 2 months of the pandemic, nearly 400,000 child care workers lost their jobs, and half those jobs haven't come back. So picture, because it feels like we could be going back sooner than some people thought, if in fact, as the administration has said, that there's going to be vaccines available for everyone by the end of May. Maybe they won't all be distributed by then, but they're going to be available. Well, is there going to be the child care for the people that are coming back, given that a number of child care workers have lost their jobs? American Rescue Plan getting signed into law tonight. Tell all your friends. Roughly $24 billion in grants to child care providers. The plan also provides $15 billion for child care and development block grants, which is really important. And one thing that's so key, it's really revolutionary. It expands the tax credits that families can receive for raising children. The rescue plan increases the child tax credit to $3,600 for children under 6 and $3,000 for children 17 and under. And it also makes the credit fully refundable, so it will help even families with the lowest incomes. It could reduce child poverty. Are you ready for this, Catherine? In the U.S. by half, but which is why many are rightly pointing out this is one of the most significant anti-poverty bills in our country's history. Other ideas moving forward, Senator Patty Murray, I'm a co-sponsor of her bill, Child Care for Working Families Act, which would cap the amount families pay out of pocket for child care. Families earning less than 150% or 1.5 times of their state's median income would pay no more than 7% of their household income for child care. Another bill that I'm leading with Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska, the Child Care Workforce and Facilities Act, would address the national shortage of child care providers and safety at child care facilities by providing grants for states to train child care workers and build or renovate child care facilities in areas facing child care shortages. So, we see it all the time, as you do, and you're personally experiencing it. One of my favorite things I worked on, I'll end with this question with kind of a nice little story, was when Senator Duckworth had her second child. I want you to picture, she's 50 years old, of course, a hero, lost her legs, serving our country, and she had one child, and then she was having a new one. And she went to me because I was the highest ranking Democrat on the Rules Committee to see if she could bring her newborn to the floor because her toddler would be there with her husband, but she thought it would be much easier if we had late night votes if she could bring her little baby to the floor. And I thought, no problem, I'll get this done. Well, little did I know that people thought this was a weird idea. And so I had to fight it, and we had to go to some of the more senior members of the Senate. And I remember at one point, Orrin Hatch said to a group of reporters, well, maybe we can have one baby on the floor, but what if we have 10 babies on the floor? And the reporters told me that, and I said, we already have 10 babies on the floor. But in any case, I'll never forget the moment when 10-day-old Miley Pearl, Tammy's daughter, and she arrived in the Senate in an appropriate blazer, a green blazer, in the dress code. And it was amazing. There was not a dry eye. All the press corps was up there cheering, everyone. And Tammy wheeled in with her little baby on her lap. And Miley Pearl slept through the entire historic moment. But, change happens in every workplace, including the U.S. Senate.
I remember that very well, actually, and I just want to take 1 second to say that I knew that about your daughter, and I told my daughter that this morning, and she had a G-tube for a long time when she was a kid, and she was so excited to hear that your daughter did too. But it's a good reminder that childcare is so difficult in even the most easy situations, but very, very, very many parents are dealing with more complicated situations that make things harder. So speaking of which, a lot of women are not just dealing with childcare, but they're also dealing with senior care because our senior care system, like our child care system, has been broken for a long time and has been stretched to its limit by COVID, and is going to struggle more with a lot of nursing homes and other facilities not being able to make it through the economic crisis. And of course, the burden of caring for older parents usually falls on women. And this is just going to get harder as the population ages. So I know this is something you've also looked at. And what are your thoughts on the most important things we could do to solve both the immediate problem and also create better options long-term for older Americans and their families?
Well, seniors, so I think everyone has their own stories. And I understand these challenges. My dad is now 92 years old, soon to be 93. He's one of 99,000 Minnesota seniors living with Alzheimer's, and millions of Americans have someone with that disease or others in their own family. And so I literally know he somehow got long-term care insurance. I don't know why, but was that a blessing? And so that's what's helping him to afford staying at a place. It's a home with like 15 people in it, and they each have their own room. They did get COVID. He got COVID, and somehow 3 people died there, but he survived it at age 92, and he's in good spirits most of the time. And I just got to visit him for the first time inside. I'd been visiting him outside with the vaccine and everything. And so I know exactly the day that long-term care insurance goes away. We're going to have gone through the money, and then we go to his savings and, of course, the Social Security, which has been helping that he had. And so many other families know exactly what I'm talking about. And once that runs out, his savings, then we're going to go to Medicaid. And just as our country addressed the needs of working moms and dads in the 70s, we now have to look at the needs of working daughters and sons. We have to look at how this works for the sandwich generation. Our daughter's older now, but people who have little kids and taking care of their parents at the same time. What do? Well, one, keep Medicaid strong. That's a safety net for so many families. Secondly, helping with a federal tax credit to assist the cost for people who are still at home, who are caring for an aging family member, investing in cures for things like Alzheimer's, which is really one of the more expensive diseases out there. And then with this pandemic, doing everything we can to connect people virtually, because even though people are now starting to visit again, which is wonderful, we know there's still going to be some issues there. And I think that one of the silver linings may be if we can have that equipment set up so it's more easy to visit a loved one if you don't live in the same place. So some of it's really big, like keeping Medicaid strong, and some of it's more about quality of life.
So professional caregivers and domestic workers who are disproportionately women of color are often not paid a reasonable living wage. And I know that you support the federal $15 minimum wage. What do you think the prospects are for that? And what else would you like to see happen to improve those jobs?
Well, as we know, that's going to be so important for keeping people in these jobs and recruiting them to do these jobs. Domestic workers are 3 times as likely to be living in poverty as other workers, and almost 3 times as likely to either be in poverty or above the poverty line, but still without sufficient income to make ends meet. And as we know, the pandemic has hit them in a big way. People have died, people have gotten sick, and they have many of them have very limited benefits. So increasing the minimum wage, yes, and I think that will happen. I think there's still debates about the amount. I'm for 15, but there are debates on that. And so one of the reasons it didn't get included in this last package, as you know, the parliamentarian ruled that it couldn't be part of what we call reconciliation. So I think there'll be attempts to revive that. The Domestic Workers Bill of Rights also would include rights for domestic workers like guaranteed paid time off, privacy protection, written employment contract, and the like. And then I think we have one more question. We're monitoring the votes because I've got, there's 50 people voting and I have to get from my apartment there, but let's go.
Okay, one very last question. I'll make it fast. What is the most radical change you would absolutely love to see happen coming out of this pandemic?
Well, I think continuing this child tax credit, when I talked about, finally eradicating child poverty, that is a pretty big thing. But then I would add to that paid family and medical leave, which hasn't gotten as much attention as a way to help women and families balance their work life. The Family and Medical Insurance Leave Act would make sure all Americans, including mothers, have access to paid leave for serious medical and family events in their lives. And so I think we've gotten a start on that, but I think it's made it very clear that this pandemic has put a magnifying glass on these inequities for women. Women making sure they take home the pay they deserve, that they can be able to support their families. We've seen how African American women and Latinas are hurt especially hard. They just make 62 cents for every dollar a white man makes. And when you look at it, you think about leave and those things. You want to, if they want to stay in the workforce, which so many people who lost their jobs in the pandemic did want to stay, you want to be able to allow them to keep staying. And that means paid family leave and childcare and the like. Otherwise, they don't just get in a bad situation at the very moment. It's when they retire, then they have less money for their retirement. And you can see that showing up in the numbers for women. So it affects the whole system if they want to keep working but can't. And so that's why I keep going to the childcare and the family leave and, of course, the wages. So that's just one little thing I'd like coming out of this pandemic.
Just a small thing. Yeah. Senator, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. And good luck with all of these bills. And thank you for all the work you're doing.
I'll be heading back there to vote for, we're going to have today our Attorney General. That's exciting. Merrick Garland and the EPA administrators coming down. So we're getting the cabinet in, which also will be really helpful to getting these things done. So
excellent.
Thank you.
We'll be paying close attention. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you. See you. Bye.